Good morning, everyone. We're going to just take a few minutes, let everybody come into the room. Thank you so much for your patience, and thanks for being here. And we'll get started in just a moment. Thanks for your patience. We'll get started in just a few seconds. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Automotive Discussions webinar series. I'm Don Lupo, ThinkLA Executive Director, and we're so glad you could join us today. Before we get started, a few reminders. This Tuesday, we'll be hosting our annual She Suite event. This year, we'll be talking She Suite in color, and our expert panelists will be discussing how women of color are making strides in the C-suite. Tickets are still available, so please head to our website to register today. In a few weeks, we'll be hosting our virtual entertainment breakfast on October 8. We'll be discussing the future of entertainment and how companies and studios are rewriting the script. Join us as speakers from Sony, Fox Entertainment, Fandango, and more bring their thought leadership to our community. And of course, our big Auto Summit is going virtual on October 21st. This is going to be a can't-miss educational opportunity with speakers like Allison Witherspoon from Nissan and Lisa Matarazzo from Toyota. Tickets will be available today, so please head to our website to register now. And when you visit our website at thinkla.org, you can register for our newsletter and find out more about upcoming events and programming, including webinars and podcasts. You can also go to our site to learn about membership. If you are already a member, thank you for renewing. You're supporting ThinkLA's mission to the community with your membership. We're already planning more members-only events and benefits in the coming months. And before we start, I really want to thank Car Gurus for presenting this webinar. Car Gurus helps you find great deals from top-rated dealers at cargurus.com. Thank you so much. During the conversation, please submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will address them at the end of our presentation. Please welcome Matt Budke, a client partner at Car Gurus, to let you know about today's program and our panelists. Matt?
Thanks, Don. Hi, everyone. As Don mentioned, my name is Matt Budke, West Coast client partner here with Car Gurus. Before I get into what to expect in today's webinar, I just want to give a special thanks to my fellow ThinkLA Auto Summit Council member, Derek Hand, and ThinkLA's very own Marcy Booth for all the work they put in to make this possible. So thank you to both of you, and a digital clap towards each of you. Now on to why we're all here today. So today's conversation will focus on how the automotive retail model and industry in general has really evolved over the past several months. We'll hear from industry leaders across varying aspects of the auto landscape in terms of how their business has been challenged and how they've continued to evolve that. So in terms of the agenda today, we'll start by opening up with the latest market research and insights presented by our both host and moderator, Mr. Tyson Jominy, who is the VP of Data and Analytics at J.D. Powers. From there, we'll jump into a discussion with our panelists, again, hosted and moderated by Tyson. So the panelists will include Laura Barnes, VP of Thompson Organization, Spencer Scott, SVP of Strategy and Operations at Car Gurus, and last but not least, Mr. Eric Peterson, Marketing Communications Manager with Lincoln, a Ford Media Company. And without further ado, hope you all enjoy, and I'll pass the baton to Tyson to go ahead and kick things off.
All right, well, thank you. I appreciate the invite to be here today. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully you guys can see it. Maybe someone from the team can say yay or nay. They're seeing me right now. You see my screen?
We can.
All right, perfect. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. As mentioned, I'm Tyson Jominy. I'm the VP of Data and Analytics at J.D. Power. Of course, all of you on the call here probably know J.D. Power. The trophies, the awards, you see it on media all the time. I'm on the other side of the house of J.D. Power. So I'm not the quality side, I'm the data and analytics side. And what we do is we get all of our data directly from 16,000 dealers in the US and Canada. each of which submits to us their DMS data, their transactional level data, what's going on in the marketplace. We get about 6 million transactions a year on both the new side and the used side of the market, and each one of those transactions has about 500 different data points attached to it. So we're swimming in data. Thankfully, my team is a bunch of data nerds. We love data, and we can't wait to share some of our findings with you here today. So looking at the industry in 2020, where are we? It's been a year, and I would say it's almost been a hell of a year so far here. So what's happened? I really see there's 3 acts that went on here in 2020. The first one is the beginning of the year. As we started the year, we were coming off 5 consecutive years of 17 million plus sales in the US auto industry. I mean, sort of a record plateau that we were coming off of. And through February, things were going very well. In fact, you see on the page, we were slightly above water, and things were going really well until March 11th. And every time I give this talk or something similar, I mention this date. This is the most critical date, perhaps, of many of our careers, certainly in the past 20 years. March 11th, 2020, remember nothing else that date. That's when Tom Hanks announced that he had coronavirus. He came out and kind of took us all by storm. We didn't know coronavirus was going to be here or not, but Tom Hanks, I mean, the guy that taught us how to socially volleyball by how of that announcement. I mean, it's hard to go back to that time, but the NBA suspended its season. The NCAA canceled the tournament. And even Disneyland closed within 24 hours of that. That was March 11th. And by March, that weekend, that Sunday, March 15th, March 16th, sales had fallen 38% by that Sunday. What happened virtually fell off the industry. And now, as you see on the page here, through March and April, we were very low and flat in our performance here. I mean, we were down 43% at one point on a retail basis here. And that's really Act 2, and we'll get into that and what the automakers did during Act 2 that really kept us from going into the abyss. I mean, these numbers are way better than we saw in other parts of the world, like Western Europe and China. But automakers took action, and then that led to where we are today and what we've been seeing here really since June. We've been running right around that 10% decline range on a year-over-year basis for retail new auto sales. We've kind of been stuck there, and we're stuck there for a very legit reason. But that's essentially where we end Act 1, which is March 11th, everything changed. And so as sales collapsed, automakers had to do something. So we'll get into that in a second. Where are we? Let's just real quickly add up all the pieces. So on a year-to-date basis, retail sales are off 16%. So again, as you saw, we were off about 43% at the lowest point. We've been kind of running in that 10% range. Adding it all up, we're off about 16%. Now, there's 2 elements on this page that really stand out to me. One is that rural markets are far outperforming northern and the coastal markets here. So you look at New York, we're seeing declines on year-to-date basis somewhere in the 20 to 25% range or so. New York and Philly, very similar results. Chicago and Detroit look really close to each other. And out west, where you guys care about the most, LA, San Francisco are both off in the 20% range, very similarly. So, but who's winning then? Well, Sunbelt markets, first of all, from Phoenix to Charlotte, Miami, the Florida markets, the Texas markets are all outperforming the national average. But as you see, when these coastal markets, when Chicago, New York, and LA are all underperforming, that means the industry is relying on much smaller markets to carry it. And it's not just smaller markets, it's rural markets. So the more rural you get, the better the market's doing. I mean, you think if you're in Missoula, Montana, or Lincoln, Nebraska, 2 markets that are performing very well, coronavirus may not have reached you very quickly, and yet what we see on the next page here, and we'll get to, is that automakers were launching these huge incentives on their vehicles, and it came to your market, and you may not even have known anyone that was impacted by the virus by this point, and yet here were these incentives that showed up. And this is really the essence of Act 2 of our story. The automakers struck back, the middle part of the trilogy. We all love trilogies. This is the Empire Strikes Back version. Automakers came back with incentives, and they did it with one type of incentive in particular, which is the 84-month loan. They were offering 0% 84-month APR offers. I mean, 84 months. I mean, it's one of those numbers that requires you to use your fingers to count. How long is that? And in some cases, they were doing up to 6 months deferrals. We're talking 90 months to repay an auto loan. I mean, that's longer than some marriages last. In 90 months, 7.5 years. It'll take you from, this recession almost clear to the next recession, if recessions come every 8 to 10 years or so. It's a really long time loan that we implemented. As you see, that's hugely expensive too. We saw record incentive spending levels here in April. We went up to almost $5,000 a unit. That's, compared to a year ago levels, that's almost $1,500 higher incentive levels in April. And that's really what kept us from the abyss. I mean, these 43% decline metrics that we were seeing, that was really good news, because at the time we actually thought we were going to be off 80%. And so these actions, these incentives really kept us away from the abyss. One more type of incentive that some automakers ran, which was assurance programs. So if you lost your job during the recession, these automakers would cover your payments for up to 6 months. So it wasn't just that we did APRs with payment deferrals. We actually did a different kind of incentive during this time, which really gave consumers that assurance that they could be out there buying a new car at this time of history. And so we ran those programs, though, clear through about May, and then we found out that, one, these programs are pretty expensive, but two, we're running out of cars to sell. And we'll take a look at that as we get to Act 3. But first, we'll see, what have consumers been buying during this time? And it's actually changed fairly dramatically. Working our way from the bottom up here, I mean, where are consumers going? Well, they're following the dollars, they're following the incentives. The biggest vehicles, the trucks and SUVs had these type of 84-month offers, and that's where consumers went. So if you see here, the trucks, large pickups, mid pickups are down only 3% on a year-to-date basis, which is just an amazing result, especially given how tight inventory is on those trucks. But beyond that, I mean, look at the next results here. The next 5 or 6 results, they all have the same word in common, SUV. So SUV sales were right behind trucks in terms of performance this year. So who's not winning? Who's on the losing side of the equation here? Well, cars, sedans. I mean, look at where the cars are. Cars were already in a weak position, and they've gotten even weaker. I mean, during this time, at the peak, we saw 78% of sales were trucks or SUVs. I mean, that's approaching 80%. That's the 80% is the number of dentists that recommend Dentyne. It's a near impossible metric, quite to get to, but that's where they've got. That's how dramatic the change has been here in terms of what we were buying. So we sold so many trucks and SUVs during this time that look at what happened to our inventory. Our assembly plants were down. Our inventory on a year-over-year basis here in May fell 1.3 million units from a year ago. Inventory got extremely tight. Now, as we got into June, we saw the incentive spend started to really dial back. And that's a result of this metric here. We ran out of cars to sell. This is new vehicle inventory. We were down, and it's gotten a little bit better, and it will continue to get better throughout the year. But that's really the defining element of what we're seeing here in Act 3 of our story, which is there are no new cars to sell. And not only are there no new cars to sell, we went over and bought every used car we could find, and we sold all those too. We basically sold out of used cars. So we're chasing inventory right now, doing everything we can to build more cars and get them to dealerships or find more used vehicles out there to sell to consumers. So you can see we really moved into the used space, starting in May, and in June, we were selling a lot of used vehicles to replace that new inventory that we didn't have anymore. And again, we basically have sold out of all of both types of cars that we sell at our dealerships. So what does this mean for you and me? What does this mean for consumers? What are we seeing? Well, first, if you're a dealer and you don't have a lot of inventory, things aren't coming in as rapidly as you're used to, you're not going to deal as much. So we're seeing dealer margins start to go up and go up, fairly dramatically here. We're seeing dealer margins going from, basically a little bit north of zero on a front end basis now to, nearly $750 higher than what they were just a few months ago. And not only that, but of course, transaction prices have gone up. On a year-over-year basis, we were seeing 7% increase in transaction prices in August. And again, that started when inventory got really tight in May, transaction prices took off. So it's a combination of lower incentive spending by the automakers, as well as lower negotiation from consumers or from dealers in the price. About a quarter of it still is the transition to trucks and SUVs. So just the market environment doesn't fully explain the change here, but 3/4 of the change is coming from the fact that we don't really have a lot of cars and trucks to sell. So we're coming into the home stretch here. Just have a few more quick hitters here to kind of set the stage for where we are. So adding it all up, again, we see that 5 years of 17 million plus, and sort of a time period where things were extraordinarily good. And now we have this coronavirus. So where are we? Well, we're certainly not anywhere as bad as we were in 08 and 09. And you look where those results were as we go back to the Great Recession. I mean, we were down to 10 million annual sales. We're thinking this year, after taking the hit, we're going to come somewhere out, upper 13s, right around 14 million SAR for the year. So things are not great, but they're also not really that bad. We peered into the abyss, but we did not let the abyss peer into us. So that's the sort of the conclusion of the story that I'm telling here. I have 3 facts I want to share just about what has shifted in the market real quickly. One is who is buying. So we go back to the previous recession, the Great Recession. As the recession went on, more and more of the buyers in the marketplace were the oldest demographic consumers. So what I'm showing here is the age buckets of consumers in market that bought a new car and how it changed relative to the prior 12 months before the recession began. So the oldest demographic, the red line in the last recession was well above 0. In fact, as the recession went on, it started going up 8, 9, 10 percentage points above its pre-recession level. And who really suffered? The youth, those when credit was cut off last time. The youngest consumers couldn't buy cars. You see that blue line, how down it is. Now fast forward to today and what's going on over the past 6 months or so. The complete inversion of these metrics. The oldest demographic tends to be the ones most susceptible to coronavirus, and they've stayed out of market. So they're mostly staying home. Meanwhile, it's the youngest consumers that are carrying us forward. I mean, the 16 to 35 demographic. I mean, as marketers, as people targeting, this demographic, this is like, this is a pretty interesting finding. I mean, the youngest consumers, the one we want, are the ones that are now growing their presence in the market as a result of coronavirus. 2 other quick facts. So one of which I get asked all the time is, what has coronavirus done on the shift to plugins? And the answer is nothing. Of course, we've had lower fuel prices during this time, but look at what's really winning. I mean, if you asked me 2 days ago, what fuel type is winning during coronavirus, I would have said, I don't know, probably just hybrid or something. Diesel. Who knew diesel is actually outperforming everything else? It's a growth fuel. That really caught me by surprise. But then right behind it is just plain old, decade-old technology. Hybrids are growing here. In particular, the RAV4 hybrid has become Toyota's #1 selling hybrid, and along with the CR-V hybrid that launched, they're actually growing the hybrid share of industry a lot quicker than the hottest section. I mean, you think about what we really talk about here in the industry: the plug-ins, the BEVs, the full electric vehicles, the hybrid, the plug-in hybrid versions here. EVs are flat year to date. I mean, 1.6 to 1.6, and plugins are actually down. The plug-in hybrids are down 0.2. The space that we talk about the most has been completely flat to down. I mean, this includes Tesla. This is all in. I mean, you think Tesla is a great sales growth story? It's not coming from the US so far, guys. Maybe Model Y will turn it around, but if you're out there thinking that, for some reason Tesla is lighting the industry on fire, year to date share is flat to last year. And finally, one more thing I get asked a lot, and it's a really difficult question to answer. In fact, I haven't seen a lot of people come up with a better answer than what we have here on the page, which is, what has happened to the digital sales environment in the US during coronavirus? And it's tough to answer because we don't really necessarily know closely how many sales were fully digital before coronavirus. It was about 10% was sort of the best guess here. What I did was I turned around, instead of it being a decline from last year, I turned around and say, well, what are we selling as a percent of last year? And I picked 2 markets that were nearly completely shut down, one of which should be pretty close to home for you guys, San Francisco. It's a little bit better story than LA, that's why I included it. Another one was Pittsburgh, in a state, Laura's from Pennsylvania, and she'll talk to us a lot about her home market, but Pittsburgh was fully shut down during coronavirus, along with California. So both areas where consumers were staying home, there was nothing going on. The one difference between the two was that California was able to complete online transactions much easier. Pennsylvania had a difficult time getting a lot of the notary available digitally during coronavirus. It took a long time to get that online. And so for the most part, the differences between these two markets was just that one was able to do online sales and the other wasn't. San Francisco ran about 30% of normal pace during coronavirus, which to me is a great proxy for how many digital sales were we doing during this time. We were doing about a third of normal volume, fully digital during coronavirus, during the peak of it back in late March into mid-April. So that's the best guess that I have seen out there as to how the industry has evolved towards the digital space. And that really concludes the opening piece here, and I'll invite the panel to start turning on their monitors and start to come here. We can transition over to the panel now as we bring everybody online. What we're really here to talk about today is that both dealers, automotive consumers, everyone has gone through just such a rapid transformation here in just a matter of months. I mean, some consumers are finding themselves doing transactions online that they've never dreamed of before. I mean, from people being able to order a margarita delivered to their house, that I like to talk about, all the way to fully buying a car and having a car delivered to their house, doing it all from their couch. And some of us have never really done business this way. Perhaps others of us, are fully used to this. But one thing's for sure as we start to talk here is that, dealers will continue to play a very vital role. And dealers and automakers, in the automotive retail environment in the United States. But this role is evolving, and it's something we want to talk about here as consumers are buying new, used, and certified pre-owned vehicles. So with that, I will invite the panel in, and certainly give you guys a chance here to introduce yourselves and say where you are and sort of what your role is. So I'll start with Laura. And if you could make sure you're off mute and tell us a bit about yourself.
Thank you, Tyson. Thanks for the slides. They were very interesting. So my dealerships are outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we were definitely at the bottom of the curve that Tyson showed. We were doing zero sales for several months, and it was quite hard. We were totally shut down, except for the fact that our service departments were able to be open because they were considered an essential service. But in the dealerships, I oversee a lot of the marketing. I do a lot of customer service and satisfaction, a lot of training, which went to a new level this year because so much of it had to be virtual. And I'm also trying to push us forward all the time with growth and technology. So it's everything pretty much consumer facing that I tackle within our dealerships.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll go to Eric Peterson from the Lincoln Motor Company. Eric, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Tyson, and thanks for having me on. Really excited to be part of this panel. What I do is I manage all the marketing communication of the Lincoln brand. So that's everything from media to creative to digital, even brand content and alliances that we have with our partners. So think events and activation. So it all falls under my team. And this is the slides that you shared were they're very interesting and certainly consistent with the things that we've seen. I've been in this business for close to 30 years, and there's really never been a time that I can remember anything like that, where the amount of pivots that we've made over a 30, 45, 60, every week a different pivot was happening because the need to stay relevant and on target was unlike anything else. No one knew what it was going to look like. A greater reliance on digital. And so it's just for a luxury brand inside of a big corporation like Ford, it was a journey unlike any other, and really excited to talk more about that and just the business in general. So thanks for having us on.
Sure. And finally, Spencer Scott from our host, Car Gurus.
Hello, thanks for having us. So my name's Spencer Scott. I'm responsible for revenue and strategy at Car Gurus. And for those of you not familiar with Car Gurus, we're an automotive listing site. I think what makes us interesting, not only can we bring a lot of data to the conversation, but we're the largest endemic site So we see the majority of car shoppers in the US. We also have a free service, which means that whether a dealer is paying or not, their inventory is most likely on our site. So we see the majority of the inventory in the US. So we see that interplay between supply and demand and how that has changed through this interesting time that we find ourselves in.
Okay, Spencer, we'll stay with you here as we jump into the discussion. I mean, I think we've all experienced a bit of whiplash or shock during this time and a lot of change. I mean, how has COVID permanently changed either your company moving forward or your go-to-market or how you do your job? What do you think is something permanent?
I think you kind of see digital retailing on the horizon, and auto is the second biggest purchase that most consumers are going to make. We knew the digital transactions were coming, but it was a 5-year, 10-year plan for that horizon. I think what we've seen is this pandemic has really disrupted the status quo, and everyone's moving faster down a digital path. And as a digital first company, what's really changed for us is just the speed in which we have to integrate with our dealer partners and the solutions that they're trying to bring to market so that we can try and bring the consumers, they come through us as the front door, as far into the transaction as we can. And it's happening at a much faster rate than we expected. We're grateful for it. We think it's where the industry needs to head. And we also want to ensure that our dealer partners are successful. So we're ready to help in any way that we can.
Okay. And Laura, I'd ask you the same thing. I mean, how has your job or your go-to-market changed, permanently as a result of coronavirus?
Well, going from being shut down to all of a sudden we had no choice to be 100% virtual everything. And we couldn't do anything at first because, quite frankly, as mentioned, the state of Pennsylvania wouldn't even allow us, our showrooms were closed, but they wouldn't even allow us to deliver vehicles at people's homes because you had to be there with the notary. That meant too many people at someone's home. They weren't comfortable no matter how we served it up. So we were dead in the water. I sort of refer to these past couple of months as a tornado. It was just a crazy tornado that just kept touching down and moving, and we had to learn how to move with it. And that was really a challenge. So here we are, we're trying to help our customers who really didn't even know if they wanted to buy a car, but some of them had to out of necessity. And we also had to figure out how to train our people while we were virtual. And while we're having a hard enough challenge working with the consumers from a virtual standpoint and making that shift, which is a necessary shift. But then it came to how do we communicate with our employees and train them virtually? And our industry can be antiquated in many ways. So that was really a huge, huge channel, keeping them focused, keeping everybody adhering to everything. When we finally could open up, to make sure that people had a comfort level. And we started with our employees because our employees were so important to us. We just wanted to make sure they felt safe and they had to exude a certain amount of confidence when they spoke to people. And then we needed to just portray that to the consumers coming in and just sort of followed their guide of what made them most comfortable. Besides the obvious disinfectant everywhere and the mask, etc. We covered the steering wheels with plastic and we wiped down every car before someone would get in. We don't do test drives with people anymore. We still don't do test drives because it puts people too physically close. So we kept doing a lot of pats on the back with our teams because we all were learning this together. And it has a lot to do with having a good culture and having a good DNA within your business that everyone's willing to trust you and follow you. And so that was the core, was our teams.
Real quickly though, before I ask the same question to Eric, do you do test drives? You just don't do them with consumers. You let them take a car out.
Correct. We had to change almost every process we do. We now, get folks registration and their insurance information to allow them. It's almost like giving them a loaner in a way. But the interesting thing is, instead of talking through the car while people are in the car, we would talk them through the car before they went for a drive. And so that was, in a way, part of the product presentation process and doing it a little bit sooner than we normally would. But so our customers are very comfortable going out on test drives by themselves. And it's working, it really is. It's become a non-issue where it did start out as a big issue.
And Eric, I'll throw it over to you. I mean, this is just a, real easy warm-up question, same thing. I mean, what from the OEM side, give us the OEM perspective on, what's changed permanently here? What should we be looking at?
Well, I mean, I think it's changing permanently. I mean, things that were already happened that really became, that became front and center were things that were already being worked on. So this was really a matter of, I would say, speed by and large, matter of change in speed and change in terms of breadth as well, things that you're offering. The thing I would like that I was really thinking about is that it wasn't just what you're saying, it's how you do it. So there's this combination of not only the behaviors that you had as a brand and behaviors that you had as a company, but then how you message those. A commercial that we were airing in March with Matthew McConaughey, from the 11th to the, as you mentioned, the 11th to the 18th became hugely irrelevant. People weren't interested in that escapism. They wanted to know about, what your brand was doing in a time like this. And that's why, to me, you saw a lot of very similar looking advertising for a while. It was, subtle piano in the background. We're here for you. We're in it together, because that was the thing that you could rely on. And, for us as a brand, we leaned into behaviors, things like pickup and delivery, remote transactions that we were already working on. So I would say a lot of it has to do with speed, and then also this breadth, having not just focused on the vehicle today, but that whole ownership experience. And that became more important by the day and continues to be. So that's kind of how we reacted to that. And that was really largely how the company reacted as well.
So Laura, Eric just mentioned the change in advertising. I mean, how did that impact the dealership? I mean, are you able to advertise deals still in the digital environment, or are you guys focusing on aspects other than perhaps just the deal?
So initially, our whole marketing focus was getting it out on all our digital devices, whatever they might be, to tell people what our COVID safety precautions were. We wanted to clearly communicate that, and we kept saying over and over and over again, we've got this covered, come on in, you'll be comfortable. And so we had to make people feel confident to come in, or even if they were just reaching out to us and we were going to deliver the vehicle to them, to let them know that we've taken every safety precaution. But, we pretty much changed our whole focus to purely digital. And of course, we got even better at our analytics, looking at absolutely everything that was working and what was stronger. And yeah, of course, we immediately put whatever incentives our manufacturers gave us up online. And we use digital retailing tools so that people can take the process. Fortunately, we got that online for almost all of our dealerships before COVID hit, so that they can go through the process of almost buying the vehicle online. Well, they can go from start to finish if they want to. Most people stop before they get to the very finish end of it, but they can build the car. They can figure out the model. They can value their trade. They can look at the incentives. They can figure out what their payment's going to be, whether it be price or whether it be financing or leasing. And even we put more and more F&I, or finance and insurance products, online, and information about that, so that they had an indication that was going to be pretty darn close of what their payment was going to be. So it helped even more with the transparency.
And that was going to be my follow-on question is, are you more transparent now or less as a result of this?
Well, I'd like to say that we've been trying to work very hard to getting closer and closer to being as transparent as possible during the entire time. But naturally, we are even more so. So everything, like everyone, catapulted us way to the front of the line of getting our act together.
Now, Spencer, you've been listening to this. You've heard the OEM side, the dealer side. I mean, we're talking about pianos playing in the background and quality and touch points. And how does Car Gurus thread that needle? I mean, how are you guys dealing with that environment?
I think it's a complex question. I mean, I would echo the things that I heard. I mean, we saw our national OEM advertisers, coming to us fairly quickly, wanting to change creative, making sure they were getting the right message in market. The dealers acted fairly quickly, and even thinking about the basics. Am I open? my hours have changed. Are you going to be safe when you come into the dealership? So I think, though, if you fast forward to kind of where we're normalizing now, we do see greater interaction with dealers that promote the ability to deliver. We don't think that it's changing the consumer behavior. The early adopters are still the early adopters, and consumers are wanting to go into the dealership when it's safe to do so. But it seems like they feel more comfortable when they know that home delivery is an option, right? So they know that they can go all the way through the process. And contactless services, the majority of our dealers have taken advantage of that. So we've changed the site in a way that makes it easier for the consumers to understand what their dealership experience is going to be when looking at a particular vehicle.
So now, Eric, to build on that, you guys are now building some fairly high-tech products. The technology available in any car in general, but some of those beautiful interiors you guys are putting into your Lincolns. It almost requires now dealers to be more like Genius Bar workers at Apple than salespeople. How are you able during this time to try to get the retail body to really promote those features at a time when it's increasingly more difficult really to even demonstrate that?
Well, that's a complex question and a really good one. And I think some of it has to, we've had that challenge for a while, right? So therefore, having dealer partners be able to walk through some of the complexities is certainly critical, and probably some of the best way to be able to inform. Because one thing to watch, it's another thing to read a bit of text where someone can do some CSA and help you with that. That's a critical element. But we have ramped up some tools to help kind of not only just to explain things, but allow people to shop. So for example, we created a Lincoln showcase. We had some experience centers in Los Angeles and in Dallas, and during COVID, they were not active. So we thought, how could we quickly make some changes to our business, things online, and basically treat those like appointment walkarounds. So we'll have that, we have that ability today, and that's one of the ways we've reacted to it. Now, certainly there's tutorials and leveraging your YouTubes and how-to videos. Those are the types of things that people want to do some remote, even before COVID. You get home and it's like, what did they tell me? But those types of reinforcement tools are probably as critical now as they ever have been. So we've been evolving our processes and our shopping, but I think it's a good complement to the activities that the dealers do.
So Spencer, kind of a broad question, and hopefully there's a number of different answers and ways we can go down here. What do you think is the greater threat to the industry right now? Is it ride sharing, lack of ownership? Is it these new technologies that we're trying to sell? Is it the alternative retail model that some of the new entrants are bringing, or is it work from home? Is that our greatest threat right now? What do you sort of think?
There's a short-term, long-term, and very long-term. I think right now the supply chain is backed up, and I think that's hurting dealerships. Inventory across all markets we see down about 25%, but turnover is down by 50%. So they're selling cars faster, but that means that there's a constant decline in inventory. So you have unfilled needs from consumers. I don't think that's healthy. More long-term, I am worried about consumer credit. I think we've thrown a lot of credit at people. There's a lot of people that are unemployed. And this is one of those strange shocks to the system. Like in your slide, when the financial crisis happened, it was systemic. It happened across the board. Where this has particularly hurt a portion of the market, I think we're not out of the woods with that. I think there's going to be, unemployment numbers are going to stay like this. Credit's going to start tightening, and that's going to hurt the market. I think more long-term, people are going to drive. I think that, autonomous driving, ride sharing, I think those things are farther off. I'm more worried about economic recovery for our industry than I am about some major disruption happening that's changing consumer behavior.
Okay. The Fed said yesterday 0% rates until we all have grandkids or something. I forget what the exact words were. And it seems like credit's pretty loose. I mean, Laura, how do you respond to that? Is credit tight, or should it be tightening? I mean, how do you view that as a dealer, a retailer?
Well, first of all, I agree with everything that Spencer said. We're seeing, I have the same concerns as Spencer does. We've seen an interesting dynamic happening. At first, when unemployment rate was there and folks were getting the $600 a week, I'm going to say, sadly, I saw people using that money to come in and buy cars. And I say sadly because I don't know that that was the best thing for them to do with those dollars. So that gave us this bizarre bump. But now that that's not in the case anymore, we are finding, and we are in a really good market. We don't have many credit issues with our customers. We are seeing more credit issues. We're having a harder time getting people bought. And we are concerned with these loans, 84 months. I mean, we won't even go there because we need a viable business. And 60 months is really pretty much where we want to be. We'll do whatever the customer wants, but we're going to guide them away from that because it's in no one's best interest to go there. I am very concerned about the economy going forward. I feel that regardless of what happens with COVID, and I'm in the Northeast where it's cold, so I think we have some more issues than some more deeper concerns than there might be in LA. But I'm concerned, I feel like the economy has not quite caught up to reality yet. I think the stock market is holding things at an artificial pace, so we still feel pretty good. And we're all pretty surprised that we feel this good. I just don't know how long that's going to last. So we just live every single day by day, week by week, month by month of just making the best possible deal with it. Knowing if we have to shut down again, we're going to be far better off to handle it. I just hope the customers will be there if that's the case.
Okay. And Eric, our OEM perspective on the situation, I mean, what do you think is the biggest existential threat we're facing?
The unknown. I mean, it's really, Laura and Spencer both hit on it. I think we were constantly, I think we over-relied on data to some extent, which is a weird thing to say, but you look at data and it could almost guide you. It almost got to the point where if I did X, I knew that I would get Y in return. We became very comfortable with that because you could make very unemotional business decisions largely on data. And what's happened over the past 7 months is been you use data to guide, but it's business acumen, it's understanding, getting a sense for where you think things may be going, pace, potential consumer changes, what might happen when it gets says, what happens if there is a wave two. I mean, no one predicted where we're at today happening the way it's happening. To some good and to some bad. I mean, so I think it's the unpredictability in the near term that has the most anxious because we're not it's not easy to pivot. We learned that that's one of the keys to success in this time, but it's certainly not easy. I've only got so much, creative in the can that I don't have to go out and film. I only have so many remote services that I can go to. So I think the uncertainty is the thing that has me the most worried in the near term. So,
fair enough. We have time for one more of my questions, and then Don's going to come back here and take over with questions from the audience that we've been getting in during this time. I mean, my last question is the other thing that we've really been seeing here in 2020. The one thing we kind of haven't hit is the social justice movement, the Black Lives Matters movement here. It's been an enormous story here in the 2020 so far. And I recognize this is, let's be honest, 4 Caucasians talking about this on a conference here. Let's address that elephant in the room right now. But are there tangible steps that any of your companies are taking, or maybe you personally are taking, in the social justice area? I
mean, I'd be happy with that. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's something. I mean, this has been just such a year with so many things happening, and the whole social justice component of it is front and center. I mean, there's just so many things, and to us, it's a matter of listening and acting. So there's a bit of really trying to take in what's happening and trying to really be open-minded about what's happening, but not just listening and hearing, taking actions. And we've done some things with our partner on the Ford side, the Ford Fund, and some tangible actions there. But also as a brand too, we think it's as important to every person of color, that we have to act accordingly. So what you see in the work that we do is things that are relevant across the board, and actions that really respond to what's happening out there. But it's just the beginning. I mean, this is something that is going to take some time, and it's going to take consistency. But as a brand, it's something that's very important to us as the Lincoln brand and as a company as well.
Laura or Spencer, you guys have anything to add?
Well, I will say that we have found a higher intolerance from people, and quite frankly, a little bit more of an elevated level of anger. When people come into our showrooms, there's just attitudes, and whether it's from issues related to social injustice or whatever, it's hard. I mean, everything is draining and everything is hard right now. And we actually, as crazy as we are, as busy as we are, we took the time to do civility training across the board with all of our employees. And it gave them some tools to help understand, to be empathetic, to understand that someone might walk in different shoes than you do, and you don't know what they're going through. And to just greet people with a smile and to just listen to what it is they need, listen to what they're asking for. Don't be ready to pounce on them with a product to offer them. Just stop and listen to them. And we speak very highly that your actions are far more important than your words are. And our employees have thanked us for it, because I think everyone's a little bit confused right now, and they're just looking for some guidance. And it's just respect and empathy, and doing unto others as you would want to be done unto yourself.
Yeah, and I can echo that. And we have a very community-driven culture at CarGurus, and realizing that we're not advocating enough, we're not amplifying the unheard voices enough. So CarGurus has really leaned in as a company, led by our exec team, and we're spending a lot of time in training and thinking, and just trying to come out of the other side of this a better servant of our community, and just help where we have been unable to help before. I mean, we've always donated money and done volunteerism, but clearly there are systemic issues happening that particularly large organizations like us in our market, we're in Boston, we can be more influential, and we're using that influence, we believe, for good now. So just have to keep it up.
Yeah. All right, well, great. I've got one question here that's come in. Speaking of the work from home transformation, how are you seeing that impacting what is going on with your businesses? Maybe we'll start with you, Spencer, since you're still unmuted. How's work from home impacting you? I mean, I see we're in your living room right now with the really cool fireplace behind you.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I would say one, and I'm maybe at a different life stage. I got a 13-year-old that turned 14 over the summer, and a 17-year-old, and spending all summer with them, eating lunch with them, eating dinner with them. They were going stir crazy, but I find myself fortunate. I think my kids were slipping away pretty quickly, going off to college and getting to spend more time at home. I think more on the company side, we have been surprised how effective we have been as an organization working remote. We have this strong collaborative culture, so hallway conversations are really important. But it's not just with us. We see it with our dealers, with our advertising partners. I think we went through this massive global experiment where everyone's like, let's work from home and see if we can be effective. And everyone's been incredibly effective. For me, the more interesting thing is, what are we going to do in 2 or 3 years? Like, are we just all going to march back into the office and start polluting the environment again by all driving because we don't want to take public transportation? So I hope we've learned we can get back to collaborative space, but we also just don't think we have to march back to the way it was.
No, I'm not staying at home for 2 or 3 more years. I promise you that much. But I mean, are you finding that consumers are searching for shorter leases? Are you getting that kind of take? Are we looking at 24-month leasing? Are we looking at lower lease mileage? You see anything like that going on in your data?
I don't know if that was addressed to me as well. I mean,
Yeah,
we do
yeah.
see, yeah,
Or
we
Laura.
do see consumers, you know, changing on term, but I think as Laura already touched on, it's actually going in the opposite direction. They're looking for low payments, so they're looking for crazy long terms. But one of the things that we saw is that traffic went up significantly. So we wanted to be very cautious that it just wasn't people sitting at home and perusing the website. Intent to buy has gone down a little bit, but still 90% of the consumers that we survey intend to buy a vehicle in the next 30 days. So the demand is certainly still there, even though traffic is up. I think we're just suffering from this supply problem.
So I see Don's here. That's the start of the Oscars music here coming over. It looked like, Eric, you were about to say something. Did you have a comment on that?
No, I mean, I won't take up too much time, but yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we're seeing, you know, in addition with the whole work from home and so many more people home, is just the media consumption that have changed so much. It's really just, I mean, as if there wasn't a booming nature for streaming and, you know, full episode player type things, that type of content just exploded. And so making sure that your ads and your content is relevant in all those different spaces, we saw that from a consumption basis for sure. Now, again, it's not changed 100%, but it's the acceleration of change is unlike anything we've seen. So.
All right, I better turn it back over to my host, or they're going to give me the real hook here and cut me off. Don, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure, thank you so much. One question we have, what are the key indicators for forecasting unit sales for 2021, knowing that the pandemic will be looming? Do you expect digital transformation to continue in the auto retail sector, and will it accelerate or slow?
I was staying on mute to see if anyone wanted to jump in on that one. Yeah, certainly it's extraordinarily difficult to crystal ball things these days. Normally at JD Power, we are a to the unit precise organization in our forecast. And unfortunately, we're now talking ranges of 13.5 to 14.3 this year alone. But some of our early indications are that we expect the industry to get back up closer to that sort of 16 million type range by next year, all things equal. Now that is an enormous asterisk on the statement, but we do see that things should start heading back more towards kind of where we were. But what remains to be seen is if we'll ever get back to that 17 million mark. And I don't know if anyone's willing to say that we will at this point.
And, you know, Tyson, with your data showing the growing importance of the 18 to 35-year-old buyers, another question is, what are you all doing to react to these younger shoppers? Have you shifted your ad platforms to target younger consumers? And what other tools are you using to win these millennials and Gen Z shoppers?
I can maybe take a swing at some of that. I mean, what I would say in that is we had already been targeting, you know, a lot of those types of customers as we had try to get younger and bring new people into the brand. So I think to me, it's maybe the connection is working, right? It's actually now we have the right products as a brand and the channels that we've been in. So for example, we're launching Corsair. It's our small premium crossover. And in doing so, we were already targeting a young customer, but what we're seeing is probably that a more relevant connection with that customer because of the media and the creative, et cetera, happening right now. So I think it's back to that flexibility. You had to be working on some of this already, but I think you'll see a continued evolution in media buying and media consumption as we go forward. Not a complete revolution, but an evolution.
Thank you for that. One more question, our last question. What's the future media mix for automotive advertising with OTT's increasing dominance?
I can provide you my point of view on that one, but I think there's still a role for all, right? Well, we sometimes we'll have the conversation is TV dead and linear TV, but they all have their places and they all have their roles in terms of awareness building, and different brands are at different places too. So you need to flex and use the right media mix that works for you. And like I said before, I think you'll continue to see an evolution. There's certainly more in terms of content relevance, but things, to some extent, some of that production is drying up, if you will, for some of the new content that, given the same type of thing we talked about in production for vehicles, there's production for content as well, which slowed down during the pandemic and is still very slow and very complicated. So things like live some of the things that are coming back, I think will have a new kind of prominence in terms of media consumption. So even just the NFL being back this weekend in basketball and hockey had some types of engagement that maybe we didn't think was going to happen. So I think there's still a role for all, but I think you're going to see a continued evolution, and certainly the importance of digital and how you interact with digital and what you message is changing day by day.
Okay. And that was our last question. I really want to thank all of you for sharing your expertise and your insights. And thanks to everybody in attendance. This was a phenomenal discussion. We really appreciate it. It's our last reminder to visit the website at thinkla.org to sign up for our newsletter, to stay up to date on upcoming events and industry news such as this phenomenal panel. Again, thank you all so very much. We'll be sending out a survey later today, and we rely on your feedback. We hope to see you at our virtual events in the future. So please take care, everyone, and please stay safe. Thank you all.